Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is we're going to actually animate we're going to animate the texture by manipulating the random seed and putting a little bit of an expression command in there. So you're going to go down to evolution. There's evolution options. You're going to toggle that down. And then on random seed, you're going to hold down your Option Alt key, and that is going to give you the option to type down here in your expressions area. And here's what you're going to type. You're going to type time times 4. And then go ahead and click off, and you're going to see that it adds this animation to the grain, which is super cool. So there we have a little bit of depth to our eye. Now that we have this shadow layer set in such a way, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to bring shadow 2 up to the top above the pupil. And when we go into shadow 2, you're going to see that it's sitting in the same place and it has the same matte layer set, which is eyeball. But what we're going to do, make sure that this is your top shadow layer. We're going to change the matte from eyeball to the iris. And if we grab this layer and move it, it gives a new shadow sitting right on that iris, which is pretty cool. Now what we can do is we can play around with the opacity of our shadow layers. Now, as you're going along with me in this tutorial, if something isn't working right, but you've mostly got it, it's all good. You don't need to, like, if one thing's not working, just skip it. As long as this is like working for you to a point to where you're getting it, just keep going. And then you can always reach out to me for one-on-one help. In fact, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make a shadow for the pupil as well, so that it's looking really nice, because I remember the pupil's kind of a dark gray instead of a black. So that could actually look pretty good. I believe the color fill that I have for these two are the dark gray that I use for the pupil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this shadow 2, I'm going to duplicate it again and bring it up above. So really I should have these labeled shadow pupil, shadow iris, shadow eyeball. But I'm going to take shadow 3. I'm going to move it to the pupil. I am going to go ahead and move this in. Now, it doesn't look like anything yet because this color and the fill color of the pupil are the same. But if I go into my contents and my shape and the fill, I should be able to change the color here. I'm going to bring it down to dark black. And then you're going to see I get a nice shadow on the pupil as well. And because I already have that animation command on there, they're all working in sync together and looking really nice. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the background layer back on. Now I want to have a total handmade feel for all of this. So I'm going to come back over to my project, and I still have my paper composition from the other composition that we worked on. So I'm just going to drag that down, and I'm going to put it over the entire composition. And of course it's going to look like this. We have to do our time remapping manipulation. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to control or right click on the layer. We're going to go to time, enable time remapping. All right, and then we are going to add the loop out command. So we're going to hover over the time clock here, holding our Alt or Option key down, Clicking there. We have our expression type area open. So I'm going to type in loop. Going to go to loop out. Hit enter. And then we are going to go ahead and stretch this over the composition. And if all goes well, this should be looping out for the rest of the comp. And it is. Perfecto. All right, now we can't see anything because we need to change our blending mode. And so let's look at the two that I usually use. I mean, you can use whatever you want, but I'm going to try multiply first. Ooh, that's looking pretty good. I am liking how that looks. So I'm going to do that one, and then I'm going to look at, I don't know why I always forget where blending mode is. Okay, multiply, and then let's do overlay. Overlay has a cool look. It really lightens everything up. But I think I'm going to go back to my other blending mode. So always important to just play around with those and see which one's looking the best, which one's giving you the, you know, the visual style and vibe that you're going for. Okay, so we've got all kinds of animated texture in here. We've got depth, we've got visual interest, things to look at. Now, I want to go in and adjust these shadows' opacity because it's a little bit too high of contrast for the lighting situation that's going on. So I'm just going to go down here to opacity. I'm going to take that down a notch. And I'm going to do the same thing for the shadow on the iris. Bring it down a notch, maybe not as much because that green is a little bit darker. And then we're going to leave the pupil alone, right? Because we've got the dark black on the gray. Okay, cool. So this eye is looking pretty good. The last thing that I want to do is I want to give some animation to this eye. I want it to kind of look around a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to definitely animate the position of the pupil, the iris, I'm sorry, but we want to bring in our graph editor to create a more dynamic look and have it kind of whip around so that it's really convincing. Okay, so the other thing that we need to do, in addition to, we did some parenting with the pupil and the iris, but we need to we need to parent these shadow layers to the layers that they belong to as well. So I am going to go ahead and rename these. So this is, let's just say, shadow pupil, so that I am parenting the right thing to the right thing. I'm going to rename this one. Shadow iris. Okay. Now the shadow, the eyeball and the shadow are not going to move around at all, so I don't really need to worry about parenting those. But I need to take this shadow for the iris and I need to parent it to the iris itself. And then the shadow for the pupil, I need to take this pick whip and parent that as well. So with all the parenting that I have going on, it should be that when I move this iris, that the shadows and the two shapes, the iris and the pupil, will all move together. So let's see if I did it right. And I did. You can see those shadows are moving around all together. So all four of those layers are bound together by parenting them. Okay? So now let's go ahead and just do some basic animation. So with the iris selected, because that's the master of all the layers, the parent, I'm going to hit my P key and bring position up. I'm going to drag my scrubbing tool to the beginning, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on the position time clock. And why don't you just go through and do some basic eye motions. So I'm just going to have mine kind of roll its eye. I have my oldest daughter is turning 11 this year, and she rolls her eyes a lot. So I feel like I have a lot of experience watching a rolling eye. Okay. And then what I'm going to do at the end here, oh, you can see the textured animation isn't all the way to the end of the timeline. What I'm going to do at the end here is I'm going to select my first keyframe and copy it. And then with my scrubbing tool all the way at the end here, I'm just going to paste that same keyframe so that the eye ends up back in exactly the same spot. Okay. So the animation itself is not very exciting. It just looks like it's kind of randomly floating around, which could be fine if that's what I'm going for, but I'm not. I want it to really zap around in there and really look like an eye that's rapidly moving around. So first we need to give the path here some curvature. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on the pen tool here, and it looks like it's bringing up the Bezier anchor manipulation tool for me. So I'm gonna hover over that, and I'm just gonna create some softer, more round movements here. So you go ahead and you can do whatever you like in regards to this, but just some softer, rounder, bendier movements. So let me go ahead and see what that's looking like. So now when the eye moves around, it's moving around a little bit smoother, more like an eye would actually move around. I can see that right here, it's going off of the eyeball, which I don't want. So I'm gonna take this handle. Oops, I just converted it. Take this handle and just bring it in a little bit so that it's not overlapping past the eye. Okay, so now let's take a look at this movement. So it's looking a little bit better, but it's just not very convincing. So let's go ahead and we're going to highlight all of these keyframes. I am going to control or right click on these as they're all highlighted, and we're going to do easy ease on all of those. So it's going to look a little bit better, but what applying this easy ease allows us to do is bring up our graph editor. So go ahead and click on the graph editor. You're going to see all of our keyframe friends down here. So let me make sure I grab that selection tool. And what I want to do is I'm just going to pull these in and give them a bit more of a whiplash, more movement, more characteristic of a living character or thing. And I'm just going to pull those across all the way through so that I have a really nice eye movement that's going to really make my motion design look professional and convincing. So I'm going to come back to the beginning here and let's just play it and see how that's feeling. So that's looking a lot more convincing. And it also, because it's beginning and ending at the same position, it's going to loop really nicely. Okay, so if you haven't saved in a while, go ahead and save. And what we're gonna do is export these and get them ready to be turned in. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the first composition, Fuzzy Wuzzy. We're gonna go to add to render queue. Your output module settings, if you click on that, it should be H.264 RGB. Everything else, can stay the same. And then, of course, what's important is where you're exporting it to. Output to. I'm putting it on my desktop for now. So I'm going to save that, and we're going to go ahead and render out Fuzzy Wuzzy. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is come on over to the eye comp, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to render that out. And I just want to make sure it's going to my desktop. Okay, perfect. Render that out. Okay, and then what we need to do is go ahead and stitch those together in Adobe Premiere so that you can submit these for credit. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Premiere. All right, so I have Premiere open here. I'm just going to hit New Project. It wants to know the name of my project. I will call it Stitch because that is what I'm doing. And I'm going to just save this to my desktop. So we come in to our Premiere interface, and I'm just going to go ahead and skip this. I want to jump right in to a project. I'm going to go in and import my media. I am going to grab these files from my desktop. So I need to grab Eyeball and Fuzzy. So we're going to grab our 2 clips. Going to bring them down onto the timeline here. Okay, so it should be 16 seconds long. Easy peasy. We're going to go to File, Export Media, or Command M. You can call this whatever you want. I'll just call it Final. And we're going to save it to the desktop. Perfecto. And we're all good. So let's go ahead and export that. All right, so let me minimize Premiere. So you're gonna wanna stitch together when we do multiple techniques. You're gonna wanna stitch those together at the end of each tutorial through Premiere. Yes, what you'll be turning in is a link to this video clip on your preferred platform. All right, everybody, please reach out if you need any help or have any further questions. Okay, bye.